private interpersonal drama made public. And I'm fully aware that Smokey is the one who pulled the trigger on airing dirty laundry, which I heavily advised her not to do, but she felt she had her reasons. Then there was this video on Veronica by Just Stop and Daft Pina, which I was very clear I wanted nothing to do with. I never spoke with them, never shared anything with them, had no contact with them, because personally I didn't think it was anybody's business. And yet I somehow got roped in as creator who wishes to remain anonymous, which I think is a cartoonishly bad rephrasing of creator who had nothing to do with this. Veronica posted a response to that video, and here we are. As I'd mentioned on Twitter, I'm not going to share any receipts. I think there's already plenty of them out there. And I know a lot of people are going to say, well, then how are you going to correct the narrative? You know, what's the point of a response if you're not going to show us any evidence? Are we just supposed to take your word for it? No or yes. I'm really not concerned about addressing anyone other than the people that were actually involved. This is a private matter. It's been made public. So while yes, I'm addressing this now publicly, I'm addressing them. There were enough people that were in the room, that were present, that were actually involved. And I will say that in putting this together, I'm actually really glad to have an opportunity to apologize to Chris and others. Not for how it started, but for how I handled things. But I'll get to that. So for them, here we go. I'm first going to respond to the basic setup of Veronica's video because I feel that absolutely sets a tone for a good portion of the narrative. The idea that I told her that she should break up with Chris. Yeah, I'm sure I told Chris the same thing. The thing is, a lot of people did. They broke up and got back together a lot, as some do. And it could get really ugly. I mean, they could paint themselves out in a really, really bad light. But that happens when people are fighting, breaking up, getting back together. And there were a number of people who, you know, were friends of both of them. And when things got ugly, when they were either fighting or when they've, you know, separated, we're like, hey, you know, we care about you both. Maybe you guys should stay apart. That's not the most uncommon thing to happen. I know for a fact I had a conversation with Veronica about how I was happy that she was with Chris at the house because I thought it was good for him for a number of reasons. And it is possible for these two feelings to exist, to want people to work out, but to also acknowledge that they could be hurting each other. And you can change your mind. Things start going good. Things are, you know, working out. But there was a number of mutual friends that had absolutely suggested it at some point during their relationship. Somehow I'm the only one who was mentioned, which just isn't accurate. Veronica then ties in the idea that I'm trying to get her to break up with Chris with this boat trip. This one is frustrating because there are so many people that were a part of this conversation that actually spoke with both Veronica and I. I'm not talking about the people with their assumptions and theories. They're welcome to those. But Veronica and I both made it very clear to a whole lot of people that this was completely platonic. What she didn't mention in her video, or if she did, I missed it. Either way, it bears repeating, is that a little bit before the boat trip, she'd invited me to Mexico with her family and presented it as a good opportunity to hang out and to also do some research for Blood Sun, which, you know, based on the location, which I'm not going to say, yeah, it would have been great. It would have been really cool. It was at a gathering, and yeah, I did give her more attention because at that time we'd been talking a lot. She'd been helping me out with some issues with my ex. And, you know, we were friends at the time, but I thought we were becoming better friends. She was someone that I trusted. She was someone I shared stuff with. And she was a great listener and gave great advice. And clearly we were close enough friends that she would invite me to Mexico with her family. Shortly after that, in late May of 21, I got an invitation from my own family that they were going to go to San Diego on a boat trip. And there was going to be about 12 family members and I could invite a friend. At the time, in terms of singular friends that would actually enjoy spending time on a boat with my extended family that they had never met, it was a pretty short list. Veronica, having invited me to Mexico with her own family, I thought it made sense to invite her to this, you know? And yes, she was on the way down to San Diego. I picked her up in the morning, drove down, spent 4 hours on a boat with a dozen family members who, a lot of them I hadn't seen in a decade, so most of the time I was just catching up with them. And Veronica was up on the deck, sometimes smoking. Got back, drove her home before dinner, the end. Never once in all the time that we were friends, even after I became a romantic cringe lord, even after she told me that she loved me and we were in that very short relationship, was there ever any doubt that that was just two friends hanging out? Even in the letter that I wrote her sharing my feelings in September, that would be 4 months after the boat trip, though I probably had feelings developing a little bit before that. I told her, you know, this was unexpected, unintended. I had no idea how or where these emotions had come from. And if anything, I was scared to share this with her because I didn't want to fuck up our friendship. It's hard to explain how, at least for me, how awesome that friendship felt. So this idea that the boat trip was somehow part of an orchestrated master plan has always been a bit of a sore spot. And it became a pivotal event and a bit of a shit show. Shortly after the trip, Chris hit me up in a text. He was not happy. He voiced his disapproval of me taking Veronica on the boat trip. At the time, I didn't think I needed his approval to hang out with a friend. Yes, she was an ex, but frankly, one that he did not seem to want anything to do with. And plus, she was hanging out with a ton of mutuals at the time, sometimes partying all night, sometimes staying at their places, which is her right to do. And considering what the boat trip even was, I just felt singled out. And I certainly didn't feel like I did anything wrong. Chris, here's the first thing I want to apologize for. You came at me hard, but I put feeling justified over what I have now known for a while, you feeling hurt. And just because I didn't feel like I did anything wrong doesn't mean that what I did didn't hurt you. And rather than sit on it, I mean, I know we kind of reached out, you know, but I could have been more proactive. And I just want you to know, Chris, that I was hurt too, you know, that you would think that of me. But that doesn't change the fact that I should have been more sympathetic to you. And I'm sorry for that. And that's my first apology. After my exchange with Chris, I noticed that a lot of Veronica and I's mutuals were distancing themselves from us. Due to the timing, I put that on Chris. And because we weren't talking, there was now two uncontested narratives. He believed that I was making moves on his ex, and I believed that he had convinced our mutuals to distance themselves from Veronica and I due to a misunderstanding. It appears that neither narrative was true, at least based off of Veronica's video, which I can't really refute the point because I never properly reached out or talked to our old mutuals about it. For a long time, I was upset because they never reached out to talk about it, and neither did I. And I know that that's also on me. But knowing what I know now, I can kind of see why they didn't reach out. It seems our drinking was the major factor, and we did. When we partied hard. You know, for two people who drink way too much, we definitely enabled each other. We were drinking buddies. She'd invite me out, I'd invite her out, and the more people distanced themselves, the more isolated we got, the more we hung out, the more I shared with her, the more I trusted her, and it felt mutual. It felt real. It felt special. She very quickly became my best and closest friend. What pissed her off pissed me off. What she was interested in, I wanted to check out. She listened and she cared. But I do got to say that when Veronica and I first started talking a lot, like daily, even when I wasn't happy with the situation with Chris and like the boat ride and stuff, there was still plenty of times I felt our conversations leaning into shit talk. And I get it. She was still pissed off about the breakup. But on numerous occasions, I did tell her, say what you got to say, but I'm not going to shit talk a friend. And after that, after the conversation I had with Chris, and the more she talked about Chris and the more I'd heard he'd said about me, that definitely changed. At some point during this timeline, Chris did take the initiative to hit me up on Discord. I was surprised, despite being frustrated with him based on what I believed. I was happy he reached out. He wanted to squash shit. I was totally down for it. But it came with the preface that I would have to admit that I fucked up, taking Veronica out on the boat. This is where I missed an opportunity. Had I sucked it up and just said, yeah, sure, I fucked up, we could have at least had a chance to sort it out. But because I never felt like I did anything wrong, because I, in my heart, knew what that situation was, I let my pride get in the way of an opportunity to work things out. I told him I was down to talk, but that I would not give him that. That could have gone another way and pretty much ended our conversations. That's not really an apology. That's just more of an acknowledgement of how I could have handled something much better. There is definitely an apology coming up. By late August of 21, Veronica and I were hanging out all the time. By this point, I felt there was this hyper-genuine bond, something I'd never experienced before. We talked every day. 100% honesty was our motto. Partners in crime, as she called it. Her excitement for life, her big-ass smile, her passion for adventure, her sonically loud laugh. She just had this infectious energy, and she was so good at making everybody feel special. I'd spent so much time holed up in my room, waking, working, sleeping, and now I was finally getting out more. I was climbing trees. I was going to dance clubs, shit I would normally never do. It was a wild fucking whirlwind. But had we known that this wasn't the real her, the pack leader, the adventure tour guide, that she was just pretending to be something that she thought we wanted her to be, none of us would have wanted that for her. And I think at some point she may have felt like, being this beacon of fun that everyone huddled around. There was just all that pressure from so many people to keep that up. And it just became a burden. But by that point, so many months later, I didn't know. None of us did. And I was in love with her. Looking back, I do think there was love there, but it was mostly idolization and infatuation. I realized that by the end of the relationship. I definitely put her on a pedestal, an impossibly high pedestal, and that's a ton of pressure to put on anyone. And I think when you are infatuated with someone, it does kind of stop being love. Love, I now believe, and we all have our own beliefs, requires a certain amount of clarity. You can't just fly by the seat of your pants the whole time. There's a certain groundedness to it, not just wild, uncontrollable emotions, because that'll make you stupid. And maybe some of you have experienced this before. I hadn't until then. You'll do and say things you never thought in your right mind you would do. When you give, you want to give everything all the time. When you hurt everywhere, all the time. You don't sleep. You don't eat. You can't think. You feel crazy. And something that I realized about myself when I'm in that headspace is that I talk and write like a sappy high school poet. Finally, in September, I did share my feelings with her. At that point, I just I couldn't even function as a human being. I couldn't think, I couldn't work. I wasn't eating. And I felt like I had to tell her. But I sat on it for a while because, again, I really cherished our friendship and I didn't want to mess that up. She was on my mind all the time. I was tied to my phone, always just waiting for the next message. I didn't know what the hell was going on. But I did write down what I felt, and this is some of it. It's really just to give a little bit of context of A, my mindset, B, the idea that there was some preconceived intentions in all of this, and also partially just how deep I was in terms of this infatuation, I guess. So yeah, here's the letter I wrote her. Veronica, you're a badass. You're beautiful, and your personality and heart are so uniquely extraordinary that your company alone inspires so many others to live with adventure and love more fearlessly. I have never known anyone like you, and I have never loved anyone more completely, more than I ever knew possible. I was so happy with simply appreciating and being so grateful for you and your company. That was and is enough, and it will always be enough. I really, truly couldn't ask for more. But another feeling hit me out of nowhere. The most unfamiliar sensation just swept over me like a wave, swallowing my entire body. I had no intention of feeling this way. How could I? I never thought it actually existed. Not just love, I feel that all the time, but being in love. I thought it was a myth, something others simply wrote and talked and sang about, a mass delusion that people bought into in order to convince themselves that what they felt was more than simply being infatuated, or hormonal, or chasing a fantasy. But I was so fucking wrong. And at its core, it's such a simple feeling, simple but so massive, that I want to make you happy. I want to see you happy, that I would do anything I can without hesitation to make that happen. And most importantly, knowing that even if I can't be as close to you as I would hope, it wouldn't stop me for a second from wanting all those things for you all the same. I can't imagine anything but this to be called in love. And you've let me experience this. Thank you for that, for sharing a part of your light with me and being the one who inspired me to discover this feeling, to understand that this is real, and to become a more complete person. No matter what happens, if this is as far as we go, I know a part of me will always be in love with you, because I've only ever felt this way towards you. But I can promise that I will do everything in my power to never let it get in the way of what I want most, for you to be happy. I will always be here for you in any shape, form, or capacity you require. It's the very least I can do, and nothing would make me happier. I mean, I struggled to send that for a bit. I mean, I didn't want to fuck up our friendship. But I also felt like it was making all of our interactions awkward. You know, it was just there in the back of everything I was thinking and doing and saying, just trying to be her friend, but having that kind of hovering there. I needed her to know. I needed her to know how I felt. And that's a lot to put on someone. She said she didn't feel the same way, which I totally got, because honestly, if she did, I would have felt it. I told her I understood, which logically I did. But when you feel that much, it doesn't just go away. It doesn't just shut off. I had to somehow put it back in the box. I tried to analyze it, break it down, make it make sense, because the amount of emotions I was feeling was just, it was ridiculous. I knew I wanted her in my life as my best friend, but I couldn't feel the way that I felt. At that point, I should have known it was infatuation, but having never experienced it before, I just thought it was some very new, very real feeling that I just finally discovered. I even wrote a list of her flaws, you know, just to try to keep me grounded, so I didn't have this perfect picture of her. It wasn't like I was mad at her. There were stupid things like she's very loud, or she sweats a lot. Just, you know, I mean, look, obviously none of these things mattered to me. I was just trying. I joined some dating apps, wanting to just meet other people, to try to get her out of my head. Veronica and I actually went through some of the different profiles for matches. lots of Veronicas on dating apps. During this time, I did in fact watch My Octopus Teacher. And while everything at that time that I was watching, listening to, reading, even street signs and billboards reminded me of Veronica, this movie hit the hardest. I just want to mention that I realize what I just said before might sound a little bit weird, but her last name is literally a street name in downtown that I had to drive by like 40 times during this whole period of time. Also, there's a lawyer or something, an accountant lawyer person named Veronica, and she's got like a picture of a dog. Those billboards and posters were everywhere on the backs of cars and shit. I mean, all I'm saying is yes, I was probably more receptive to it, but I'm not crazy. It was literally everywhere. Look, I'm sure if I watched My Octopus Teacher now, I'd still greatly appreciate it and enjoy it. But during that time, feeling all of those feelings, and it wasn't just that movie, there were other things going on, but it eventually led me to this belief that I called my emotional awakening. To a degree, I do still believe this, just with more nuance, that you can love someone or something unconditionally, needing nothing in return, even from a distance. No ownership, no expectation, that so long as they are happy, you are happy. It's a good sentiment, harder to execute, and it did evolve over time. But I genuinely did feel I had accepted that philosophy that I had just made up. But it did allow me to move on. You know, Veronica was with Mark, and I was happy for them. I was going out, meeting new people, living my life, working, having fun. And while Veronica was on my mind, I wasn't paralyzed by it. I wasn't waiting by my phone, checking my messages. I could focus on work. I was sleeping again. Things were good. And at this time, I absolutely still told her I loved her and that I always would, because I did. And I didn't need to be in a relationship with her. And I could be happy because she was happy. At some point in her video, she mentions love bombing. I'm not sure if it's this part or if it was the favors that I was doing for her. She brought up me mailing her cigarettes to Ireland. Dude, you hit me up. You were so mad about those cigarettes because I think it was close to the beginning of your trip or early-ish on, and you were jonesing. You weren't going to be able to get the brand that you like there. And so you asked me to send them. And of course I was going to do that. I was happy to do that. I was even happy to wrap them in a different product box because apparently you're not allowed to send tobacco internationally. If I just doxed myself on a crime, oops, arrest me, sorry. But I was happy to do that. As far as the Apple Pencil, I don't remember if that was at the exact same time as the cigarettes or not, but all I remember is that you said that you wanted to work when you were out there and that you forgot your pencil. I had an extra one, so I was like, might as well send this too. As far as the money, I realized that a gift of money from friends can be weird, but I saw you stressed out about your commissions. You were trying to save up money, not just for the trip, but spending money when you were there. And you know, we talked about it. I was like, who knows how many times you're going to have to, how many opportunities you're going to get to go out there and hang out and have fun. I want you to go have an adventure, have fun with Mark. And I happen to be in a place where I could offer that. I don't know if that's love bombing or not, but every friend I know knows that if they need a favor from me, there are very few favors that I won't do for them. Yes, if I just did all of that stuff unprompted out of the blue and just dumped it on you, yeah, that would be weird. And that is something that I did later on when we were together. I'll get to that. But this emotional awakening thing, as cringe as that, what I call it, I'm still thankful for that. Allowing me to feel something I never knew existed. I mean, I know what infatuation feels like now, and I can better determine when I'm feeling love. And that is something that I can share with others. Halloween of 21, Veronica brings up a situation where I pulled her aside in an open kitchen surrounded by people and said that I heard she got back with Mark after their very short breakup, that I was happy for her, and that I will always love her. I do remember this. Of course I remember this. And your big big shiny eyes. And she'd later say that this was the moment she wanted to tell me that she loved me. I don't know if that's true or just something she thought I wanted to hear. But if anyone is following this, yes, of course I said that. And I meant it. She was still my best friend. And it wasn't a dig at their relationship. Specifically, I said I was happy she was working through it. I was proud that she didn't just run away, that she was trying to stick to it. Later, I did approach Mark and I said something along the lines of, hey man, no matter how long this lasts, you can always use my booth. They'd broken up and gotten back together in a matter of days. What I was trying to communicate was whether he was with Veronica or not, he was still welcome to use it. Mark, I could have worded that better. And honestly, at that time, you didn't need a reminder of your breakup. I tried to say something that I thought was positive, and I said something stupid, and I'm sorry for that. For about a month, everyone's just kind of doing their own thing. Mark and Veronica, they're off doing their stuff, and Smoke and I end up having our own very weird adventures. And during that time, begin to have our own feelings develop for each other. Not some wild infatuation, which obviously we didn't know was infatuation at the time, that we had for people that we considered our best friends, but a mutual appreciation built on months of supporting each other through the weirdest, the best, and the worst emotional roller coaster that either of us had ever experienced. She'd been there supporting me through it all, and I'd been there to support her. Our situations weren't identical, but they were parallel enough. And I think we recognized our capacity to care for others and each other as our own special bond. Something we experienced together that was separate from everybody else. I still held on to this emotional awakening philosophy, though, that even though Smoke and I were starting to feel for each other, I did still love Veronica, even if I never intended to be with her. And that is where this coping philosophy suddenly became broken. I did care for her a lot, but while I'd in my mind successfully compartmentalized my feelings for Veronica, they were still there. And Smoke understood that. She too still had strong and conflicting feelings for someone. So we decided to approach things very, very slowly, just making sure that our friendship was always the priority. Things seemed to be progressing fine. The only possible scenario where my whole new age emotionality would implode on itself was if literally the last thing that anyone expected could happen happened. And that was if Veronica told me she loved me and wanted to be in a relationship. And out of the fucking blue, that happened Thanksgiving of 21. I was floored. It didn't feel real at the time. Yes, Smoke had notified me before Veronica could contact me. She did kind of take that moment away from her, but she was reasonably scared that what we started to develop was going to get blown out of the water. I mean, she knew better than anyone else how strongly I felt. She'd been my main support throughout all of this. And that if I didn't take this chance, it was going to live in my mind forever. Had the tables been reversed and the person that she had, been in love with reached out to her, she knew I'd do the same for her. We cried a lot. I hate thinking about that conversation. It was just such a weird scenario. This whole thing is such a weird scenario. Veronica called and eventually told me that she was, in fact, in love with me. It was hard to breathe. I didn't know what the fuck was going on. Obviously, I was happy. I mean, that's not the word for it. I just, but I do remember a moment of clarity when I asked her, "Are you sure? Are you absolutely sure?" Because at that point, she'd broken up with Mark twice in a month and told me that she had loved him. And she said yes. She was sure. And I believed her because of course I fucking did. I was in love with her. Or I was infatuated by her. I think I said the phrase, "This feels like a dream. This doesn't feel real," almost every day of that 1 month relationship. As soon as she said we were official, the floodgates opened. all the pent-up daydreams and hopes I had that I'd been building up since the end of the summer, that I'd stuffed away and compartmentalized, just poured out. Talking about moving her in, building a fence for the dogs. The Shire wedding thing, though, dude, come on. The whole like, oh, are we talking about this? I mean, that is a joke. People know that joke. You know what? I guess in this situation, it was kind of a half joke, because I did mention that not since my divorce would I be willing to reconsider marriage, but since, being with her, it was something I'd consider. Like many, many years down the line, not like, right away. It was still too much, too fast, and I could see it all happening. The problem was I didn't know how else to be. I wanted to give her everything all at once, all the time. I didn't know how to hold it back. At the time, that's all I wanted, was to make her happy. But that's not love. No one can make anyone happy. They have to want that for themselves. I can support them, but no matter how much I want to give them happiness. In fact, when you give too much, it becomes a burden. It's like trying to force your head into a bottle. It's an ooze. You're drowning them. I know it felt real at the time, but it wasn't grounded. It was just illogical emotions. And while that can feel good at times, it's not substantial. You can feel it, but you can't build anything on it. And I did that. Honestly, the whole summer leading up to that was already a blur. So much fucking happened. But December was just peak insanity, if you can believe it. There were so many people in the house. I think we all got COVID at some point. Veronica mentions that I paraded her around like a trophy in front of Mark. Dude, I was just so happy that something that I never imagined happening was happening. And I did try to be sensitive to him. You know that. We talked about this. I completely understand why, but he was at the house almost every single day. And during that time, you'd even sometimes spend the night over at a friend's house with Mark. And I had no problem with it. I trusted you. And if Mark needed that, I totally respected it. But yeah, after a while, I felt like I couldn't even treat you like my girlfriend in the house. And that felt weird. Looking back, I think maybe what you wanted was a dynamic that was more similar to when we were friends. Before I went all ultra love crazy on you. You wanted a partner, not a yes man. And me, thinking we were a couple with months of hopes and expectations that I'd bottled up, wanted to finally share all of it with you all at once. I think we just entered it at different levels, which honestly just isn't sustainable. A little before New Year's, you were sitting out back, you seemed lost in thought, and I asked you what was on your mind. You said a million things, and I asked you, well, what's one? And you expressed that you didn't necessarily want to break up, but you felt a need to be on your own 2 feet, to get your shit together, to build something, to do something, and that you weren't sure if you could do that if you were focusing on a relationship. And I told you that I wished that we could do that together, that I could help support you in that journey. But if you absolutely felt like you had to be on your own, no matter how much I wanted to be with you, I would absolutely step back from that relationship. And if anything, be happy to be your number one cheerleader. We broke up a couple days later, pretty much the same conversation. Believe it or not, this is when things start to get weird. Weirder. Mostly me being weird. But because Veronica had spent so much energy and emotion dealing with the guilt of hurting Mark, she didn't have the mental or emotional capacity to deal with my shit during the breakup. So I was pretty much cut off, which I understand, but I just felt that there wasn't really any real closure. It felt so abrupt. And I had so much pain at the time, and I didn't know how to work through it. And she didn't want to hear it, or she couldn't. She wasn't in a place to. I think we both did continue to try to be friends. We weren't best friends anymore by any stretch of the imagination. But man, this period was just such a blur. I left town. You took JoJo. Thank you. Again, I tried to just clear my head. Side note, I absolutely did tell Veronica at one point that I felt that I'd gotten JoJo for the wrong reasons. No, we weren't together when I got him, but we did pick him out and, you know, kind of pick him up together. And you know what? I just thought that even as friends, that you and your dogs would be more a part of his life. But honestly, that's just more expectation that I put on you at that time. So, but I will say that after over a year, he's one of the best decisions that has ever happened. I could not imagine my life without that beautiful little freak with absolutely no survival instincts. At some point after the breakup, Veronica and I did speak. And I asked her if she ever loved me, and she said no. And that crushed. And she told me about her and Mark, more crushing, because at the time, you know, it was the opposite of what she said she needed when we broke up, about her being on her own and you know, not focusing on a relationship, which is absolutely her choice. You know, she can change her mind whenever she wants. And telling me that she never loved me after I asked her if she was sure, and also after we broke up, asking her, hey, you know, did you ever really love me? Because I was unsure. And she said yes once, but then I appreciated her at least owning up and saying, no, I don't think I ever really loved you. But you know what? Emotions are messy, and people, I guess, don't always know what they're feeling. She did apologize for lying, but I mean, man, I was still hurt. By the end of that talk, you know, I think I was holding back a lot. I was trying not to be too upset, but I was. And I did say that very shitty thing about, okay, fine, then I'll go fuck Smokey. I was hurt. I was being a dick. And I directly, after that conversation, went back and told Smokey about it. And I apologized to her. And later I spoke with Veronica and I apologized to her. It was a childish, reactionary thing to do, no matter how I was feeling. This descent has not reached max velocity. Trust me. We got a ways down to go. Very suddenly, after months and months of just so many people being in the house, a whirlwind of breakups and makeups and breakups, everyone was gone, including Veronica. Everything felt empty, you know? It was super silent. There was weeks I didn't turn on the lights. I felt like a stranger everywhere. And the friends I had before that I considered family, I mean, they were the reason I moved to Burbank. They were gone too. My house didn't feel like my house, and my dog didn't feel like my dog. It was just a very surreal, empty feeling. I don't know if anyone who's watching this has ever experienced this before, but you literally feel like you don't exist. Part of me blamed Veronica, part of me blamed Chris, and I recognize now, and I have known for a while, that how I ultimately shared my love, or what I thought was love, and my pain, which was a very real pain, how I poured all those things onto Veronica, that was the force that pushed her away. And with Chris, man, I had so much preconceived bullshit, a mixture of how our interactions went down, what I'd heard you'd said about me. And dude, I know you said some shit about me, but considering the circumstances, can't really blame you. Veronica and I venting for so long, but mostly my assumption that Chris was responsible for pushing people away from me. I had a very toxic mindset at the time that had been boiling over for months, which culminated in some very embarrassing shit at the Smiling Friends party. So by now I'm fully convinced that Chris is largely responsible for driving my friends away, dragging my name, making shit up about me, all reinforced by almost a year of Veronica telling me the worst things about him, me absolutely complying to that by the summer and joining in the shit talk, and I was still incredibly hurt by how everything went down. I debated going. While I was invited, which I greatly appreciated, thank you, I also had a very strong sense of not being welcome. That may or may not have been the case, but I still hadn't clarified anything with anyone, specifically Chris. So at that point, this is all still in my head, and that's absolutely on me. I ultimately decided I would go, because I still felt I was unfairly judged and that I wasn't going to let Chris believe that he could scare me away. I understand how dramatic that sounds, but at the time, after that many months, after all the talks, everything I heard, that was my thinking. When I saw Chris, he was at the bar. There was a bunch of people. I was on the fence about whether I was going to say anything to him. There was a number of people around him that I greeted, and after I greeted everyone I recognized, I decided in the last moment to approach Chris and shake his hand and say, "Hey, man." The alternative would have been to just walk away, which I also felt would have been awkward and passive-aggressive, but given the circumstances, probably very much the better choice. At the time, I felt like I was standing up for myself. Based on the preconceived notions I had and how hurt I felt, somehow it felt like the right thing to do. And later, when I recounted the event to Veronica, partially to probably impress her, her reaction confused me. She seemed annoyed at me, and I later found she considered my shaking his hand as some form of kissing up to him, which was frustrating considering that was the opposite of my intention, and I thought that was obvious. In my probably drunken attempt to clarify my intent to her, I very much dramatized the events and my language and my emotion and sounded not just like a dick, but a corny supervillain. This is my second apology. Chris, while I will always stand by the fact that I believe you misunderstood my intent of taking Veronica out on that boat, I should have been more sympathetic because you were my friend. No matter how hard you came at me, and you did, I should have put you feeling hurt over my belief in your misunderstanding this. I let months and months of toxic, one-sided shit talk solidify a vision of you. Had I been more proactive about reaching out and trying to clarify things, a lot of this would have been avoided. I wrongly assumed that you were the major contributing factor for a lot of people that I cared about distancing themselves from me. And I allowed a lot of that to be amplified by a great amount of hurt that I was experiencing at the time. And I put it all on you. And that is, there's nothing more unfair than that. Above all else, I recognize if you decided that you wanted nothing to do with me, that was your absolute right. And no amount of self-righteous pride, which I believed was standing up for myself, no matter how hurt I was, should have ever superseded that. And I'm sorry for that. People can say and do things that are in no one's best interest when they're hurt. And that hurt can become anger or frustration, and that sometimes gets directed at people. Someone cheats on you, someone lies to you, someone breaks your heart and cuts you off. Someone can be hurt and react in anger. Is that always right? No, of course not. And not everyone reacts that way. I get it. But it is something that happens. And in isolation, it is usually almost always a really bad look. Guilt will do that too. Just the lowest points in general of our lives. And at that time, there was a lot of hurt and frustration and anger on my part that Veronica shut down because she just didn't have the mental bandwidth to deal with it, which I understand. But at the same time, it just felt like I was being ignored. Someone who I thought I had this special bond with, someone who told me that they'd loved me, just cut me out. I've known for a long while that I was a big part of that. I was basically doing the same thing before of trying to pour all my love onto her, but this time my hurt and frustration. And you get a lot of low points from that. A lot of sad, frustrated, confused calls and texts. And not everyone handles things that way. I get it, but some do. And I did. And like Veronica said about her own decisions, you know, you add alcohol to the mix and it can get bad. And I did that too. Now, if you selectively curate all of these lowest points and put them all together, you get a very clear but one-dimensional view of a person. And I gave you a lot of material, I know. And I'm sorry for that. Not because you put it in a video, but because you had to deal with that. That you were someone I cared so much about and I put that on you. But to say that that is me, all of me, the real me. Look, I don't think you were fairly or fully represented in the video calling you out, because I know that there's a lot of good too. I became best friends with and infatuated by some of those aspects. But I also know that when you want to hurt someone, you can go hard. Poor little Brian Griffin. I'm not going to go into details, but it was a shitty thing to say, and to his face, multiple times. And I get why you said it. You felt guilty, you were tired, you were frustrated, and you reacted. Does it mean that you cared about him any less? No, of course not. If I were to take a clip of that situation and every other thing you said when you were frustrated, put it together and posted it, is that you? Is that all of you? Is that the real you? No, of course not. Look, I can be petty, I can be shitty, I can be mean, but I don't want people to suffer. I don't want to make somebody cry. I don't want to watch somebody cry. I remember when Mark came over once to record. This was a little bit after the cheating situation. And he said to me, I bet you're loving this. That baffled me. I'm not blaming him, but just the idea that anyone would think that anybody would gain any kind of genuine pleasure from something so shitty happening. It boggled my mind. Yeah, you know what? Maybe I would make a snide comment. Maybe I would, make a remark about it or something like that. But I would take no pleasure in that happening. There's no part of me that wants that for anybody. And the fact that anyone thought that or would say that, I mean, maybe it was just an offhanded remark and I just took it to heart. Like he really thought that I thought that. I don't know. But it just sucked because I told him, I was like, of course not, because of course not. I don't want anyone. I didn't want that on you. I didn't want it on him. I didn't want it on anybody. A lot of people got hurt. I have never wanted you to fail, Veronica, or Mark, or Chris even when I was friggin' angry at him. Not in relationships, not in work. Doesn't mean I haven't said some shit, but ask any single one of our mutuals, no matter what I've said, I've always stated, I hope they work out. I hope the project turns out good. I hope his health gets better. And I do. I hope everyone fucking works out because I gain nothing from people failing. I'm not a saint, and sometimes I am an asshole. The whole positivity thing, do I think it's good to be positive? Yes, absolutely. I think it's something to aspire to. Who doesn't? The nice guy thing, other people put that on me. And when they do, I often try to remind them, dude, I am flawed like anybody else. I am not always nice. I try to be, and I do wish the best for other people, no matter how many screenshots or voicemails that you have of me saying something shitty. My friends know this, my family knows this, and I know this, and that's all that matters. You knew I was ashamed of the MagFest panel back in 2016. You mentioned it, and you also mentioned the divorce, which I appreciate. It does give it a little bit of context. It's not an excuse, but yeah, there were other things going on during that time. And you knew why I was ashamed. I've talked about it on podcasts and streams. The reason that event haunts me, the reason that I will never stop apologizing for my behavior, it had nothing to do with my reputation. Some people thought it was highly inappropriate and embarrassing. Others thought it was funny and cringe. I got over that. What I never got over were the people that I let down. My friends on the stage, the people in the audience, my girlfriend at the time who was watching on a stream with her company, the fans that drove from Texas, that kid with the Sans mask, that shit crushes me thinking about it today. And it should, because it's a reminder. I don't like hurting people, and I don't like seeing people hurt. Even the people that have thrown me under the bus repeatedly in some cases. And that is not some kind of sympathy plea. I don't need that. My ex-wife is a good example of that. I hope she is well. I hope she's living her best life. I really do. And it's not because I'm some nice guy or I'm trying to be positive. It's because I don't fucking care. There are too many good things, too many good people that I would rather focus on. And that is actually a really good segue. It's mentioned in that video that that guy on the stage of MagFest 2016, that's me. That's who I am today. That I have never improved, that I showed up to social engagements already drunk, that I'd black out at parties, that I'd act belligerently. Yeah, sometimes. Especially during the time that I was with Veronica, because we definitely enabled each other. I'm not blaming her, I'm just saying that was a mutual thing. I don't know why I felt the need to drink before social gatherings. I don't know if it's some kind of social anxiety or what. Or when I do start drinking, I just don't stop. But I can say that in this past year, I haven't felt the need to do so. I can still drink too much. I definitely do sometimes, especially before bed, because I've always sucked at sleeping. And I admit my biggest problem is that I'm convinced I can quit. I work hard, I get a lot of shit done, and in the past, I've quit for extended periods of time. In fact, before the summer of 21, this whole fucking, all these events, I'd quit for a month because of my stomach. I had a bacterial infection and I wasn't supposed to drink. I was fine. There was no shakes or anything like that. And I think because I believe I can quit whenever I want and I'm productive, that it really isn't a problem. But it is. And it has been for a long time. And I have brought up the idea of quitting for ages. You know, I think Veronica and I talked about it a couple of times, but I've always put it off because if I can quit any time, then is it really a problem? Yeah. So I'm quitting. I'm not sure if I'm going to do AA or what. I have a lot of good people around me and I know they want this for me. So for the sake of my old friends, my new friends, my family, but mostly for myself, this day seems as good as any day. I am nervous. You know, I've been drinking since I was like 15. And, you know, it became like part of my brand and reputation. It didn't age well, but, you know, I'm excited for a positive change, get healthier, lose some weight, save some money, make some better decisions, sober decisions. I am still going to fuck up. Oh, I'm sure. I'm still going to make mistakes. And I just want to say that I really do appreciate it, Veronica, that you brought up some things that I didn't know. Not fully. I think a lot of the old friends did mention it. And I don't think I ever saw it for as big of a deal as it was. And I also appreciate you reminding me of things that I did know, but I chose to ignore. And for that, I thank you sincerely. This is the second positive life change that you've inspired for me that I get to keep forever and pass along to all those down the line of my life. Congratulations on your sobriety, Veronica. And thank you guys for spending this, my 5th day. I mean, it's a start. I wish you and Mark and Chris and all my old friends and all my new friends and my family, my mom, I know my mom's gonna love this. I wish all of you guys the very best. Salut.